Patty, thank you so much for joining me today. This is the first edition of the podcast, and I couldn't be happier to be here with you today. So thanks for hopping on.
Oh, thanks for having me. You're one of my favorite girls in the industry.
Oh my gosh, you
I love
too.
watching you grow in the industry as an influencer. So super happy to be able to be here with you today, virtually.
Yes, yeah. Well, I know so many of us look up to you, and you've done so many incredible things with your career. And one of the areas that I wanted to dive into on this podcast was really just kind of getting into some of those moments that you felt you were particularly audacious, like really stepped outside of your comfort zone or went for it, or in those moments where you felt like you needed to make a change. And so the first question I want to ask you is, what is one moment that you can think of when you were really audacious in your career?
Wow. So the first thing that kind of jumps into mind is, I started this industry when I was 16 years old. So my whole formal education is in the mortgage industry. So I didn't have a formal education. I always felt really insecure about that. And I have major imposter syndrome. And I think a pivotal moment for me was, I remember I was asked as one of the very few presidents and founders of an independent mortgage bank our size, I was asked to speak. And I was the last person that was going to be introduced. And everybody ahead of me was, graduated from Harvard and has her MBA and blah, blah. And I'm like, oh no, what's my introduction going to sound like? And I was so insecure, so nervous. And I remember I sat up on the stage and the first thing I said was, well, I'm a graduate from La Mirada High School and I won Miss La Mirada. Like that was all I had to say. And so I think it was at that moment for me was because I think that a lot of people and especially minorities, which I work in, a huge minority space, we have this roadmap or this ideology that we're supposed to be something, right? And everybody, we all have our different paths and we all learn it a different way and we're all smart in different ways. And so I think that moment for me, and a lot of people think that I've been publicly speaking my whole life, was really the first time I spoke on a panel. So I took that and I started studying about how to talk from the heart and how to be authentic. And because that's what I was. I'm an authentic business leader. I'm very smart. See how I can say that now with like confidence. I'm so smart. I'm very smart. I know this business very well, but I think our insecurities, prevent us from being who we're really supposed to be. And so I think that moment for me was my breakthrough of, Patty, don't let your insecurities control your success. And definitely don't let people see your insecurities before they see who you really are. So that was a very pivotal moment in my career.
Wow. Yeah, that is so good. Been the story of my life. I feel like I'm constantly struggling with that imposter syndrome. And I couldn't possibly imagine that I would be speaking from a certain stage or be, when I was thinking about selling the company, it was not in my mind. Someone else said, have you thought about selling the company? And I was like, oh no, no one would ever want to buy the company, but there are things like that constantly that I think are so difficult to overcome. And, but they are very transformative when you do. It takes you to a new level in your vision, not only of in your career, but also in your sense of self. And I think the more that we see women or hear women talk about those stories, I think it empowers us to be able to think about how we can overcome that kind of imposter syndrome or be more audacious. So that's a great story. So another question for you is if you could describe a moment in your career when you decided to do things differently, like whether it's a pivot in your career or just a shift in management styles, what's the time that you decided to do something different?
Well, our business had been, taking off, and we're a call center, and I don't know if a lot of people know that. And I knew, just have been in this business so long, that if we were going to have longevity, we really needed to tap into the purchase business. And so that's when we came up with the idea to open our distributed retail, which now we run one of the largest distributed retail platforms in the country. So I think my leadership style is very different. It's very woman-like. I run the company with 100% care above anything else. Like, I care about you. I care about how you feel. I care about your voice. And I think I was, that's a change of how most people are taught to run a business, right? Business leaders are supposed to be hard. They're supposed to come down on you and drive you to success. They're supposed to be, a little bit flashy and show you their success. I am completely opposite. I like to be in the trenches with the people. I like to sit from the ground up, because that's where I started, and not be at the top, because at the top you can't see anything. So I think that running a company very woman-like with a fundamental daily vision about caring. I think that at first I was a little insecure about it, but it seems to have worked. And the funny thing is we're male female leadership, so I have the male influence. Rick is the CEO. He's very much the visionary, and I would say that I'm very much the heart. And I think that there's kind of a lid for every pot in our company. So if you want that male driven visionary type leadership, you can look up to Rick. Or if you want to be led by love and caring and family like culture and feeling like you belong to something bigger than yourself, then you look up to me. So that's kind of a cool thing that organically happened at our company.
Yeah, I love that. I think that, male or female, we benefit so much from that type of leadership, though, it just being more heart driven. And I was very self-conscious of that. I think being in different leadership roles and even coming into the one I'm in now, it feels like you're supposed to act in a certain way. Like, a sales leader is typically a man and they act in a certain way. And everything you read about in sales books and whatever is like, I don't know, just the approach feels masculine, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's very effective. But I think the more that I have learned to tap into what's authentic to me and what I find to be like, if I try to behave in a certain way, it's not effective because it's not genuine, and I think that that's really helpful and why diversity is important and that kind of thing, is just having that kind of authentic approach that's really going to resonate most with people because it's you.
Yes, I agree 100%.
So this is a very easy question, but one I want to ask you anyway. In what ways have you challenged the status quo in our industry?
I think if you had a poster that said, "This person challenged the status quo of the mortgage industry," you probably have my face planted on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I've changed it. It feels really good. I feel a huge responsibility to all the women looking up at me, letting them know that this is very possible. I use my voice. I think I'm appreciated for that amongst my peers. And so I enjoy just being authentically 100% who I am. And that is somebody who just battled the street to get where I'm at. I was a loan originator. I had realtors yelling at me. I was a processor. I had loan officers yelling at me. I mean, organically, I was really fortunate to just have been in every seat in a mortgage business that I'm able to now really lead by example and know where people are coming from. So yeah, I am changing the status quo. I'm super proud of it. There's a few women that we all know each other, and it's funny because we all equally admire ourselves for doing the same thing, but there's a handful. But I'm starting to see the emerging leaders. I've looked up to you since the second I met you years ago at a NARP event. So we're looking at you too, or like Nuria. I know there's, Nuria, like I'm looking at you girls to be that next wave. And I think that's exciting. I feel very fortunate, actually.
Yeah, definitely. And it does feel like such a time in our industry where people are welcoming the challenge to the status quo. I mean, there's obviously a lot of barriers and that kind of thing, but I think people appreciate whenever you are bringing a different perspective or approach. And so it's an exciting time. And I know, like I said, I've looked up to you forever. And I feel like so many of us are looking to you and others as an example of authentic leadership. So I think when we think about challenging the status quo, it's not just thinking beyond how things have been done. It's like looking internally.
Yes, exactly.
So speaking of, my last question for you is, in what ways have you challenged the status quo in yourself? Like, is there any kind of anything you could speak to in terms of your mindset or just internal dialogue that you have challenged? And I know you spoke to that a little bit earlier in terms of just kind of the like getting over some of the imposter syndrome and that kind of thing. But are there other areas that you've shifted your mindset in order to be the leader you are today?
It's just an ever evolving talk with yourself, right? You should be yourself's very best friend. You should be the one cheering yourself up when days are really hard, because in our business, really hard. And so I found that my personal cheerleader was me. And, the only great thing about getting old is that you become much more secure of who you are and who you're supposed to be. And so, I feel a lot of gratitude. I feel very honored. Sometimes I feel better lucky than good. But I think is that I'm settled in who I am, and I feel very comfortable around people that I used to be super intimidated about around. Now I feel like, I gave the kudos to men really in our industry as well for really embracing the fact that we're using our voices. And so I feel comfortable where I'm at right now in my life, and I'm just excited and not angry ever. And that's kind of a good thing, right? So yeah, our business is hard. Anybody who's an independent mortgage maker knows, listen, there's no ladder in mortgage lending. It's a freaking roller coaster with all kinds of tips and turbies and rounds and ups and downs. And so, yeah, it's when I found that I was my personal very own best friend.
I love that. I feel like life is a roller coaster, and it is just that's so like cliche to say, but it just, you have to constantly be focused on your mindset. And I know that that's been really important to me. You mentioned that you were one of a handful of female executives, really. I mean, that is growing, like we talked about, but do you ever feel like you are, because you've challenged the status quo and you stand out a little bit, does that create a sense of pressure on you, or are you kind of able to, how do you manage that, I guess?
Yeah. So like I said, just in my last comment, it's the men in our industry has really embraced me. And yeah, I talk to the women that seek advice from me, because no matter what, sometimes we feel intimidated. And listen, there's bad in everything, right? And, but yeah, I feel very confident in my voice, especially in this industry. And I feel like I've done a lot of good for everyone and using my voice with regards to regulation and with regards to just the way we all run our companies. I really feel like I do for the bigger good, right? So, the people that I want to love me, right? Mm-hmm. And the people who I don't care like me or don't like me, I don't care. So I always say, seek approval from those whom you respect. So people that I respect really care about me, and I appreciate that. So other than that, I can't worry about it. So
that's so good. I'm such a people pleaser. I just like want everyone, if someone is unhappy, then I'm like, but they need to be happy. but you have to be authentic to you and care about people that you care about. So yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Patty, for being on. I appreciate everything you've done in our industry and your leadership. And thank you for taking a little bit of time with me today.
Thank you. It's always my pleasure. Thank you so much.